Okay, let's start.
Yeah, go.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to my YouTube channel and the videos for obesity. This might be for you educators, coaches, trainers, or psychologists. I'm here with Gary Robinson, the sports psychologist and a clinical psychologist. And he's been working a lot with mental health issues. I'm doing this as an assignment for my master's degree, which is in exercise for rehabilitation, but also prevention and intervention. So I'm very lucky to have met Gary in his vacation, and here we are doing some interviews. So Gary, please tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, so I work in the UK. I'm a clinical and sports psychologist, and most of my experience has been working with adults in mental health services. But I think one of the common things, and even with athletes as well, one of the common things that people struggle with is how do they change certain behaviors. So I think what happens with human beings, we tend to work in a way that we get into habits. So we just get into ways of being in certain behaviors. And actually, the problem that people find is then when they come to try and change that, it's the changing of the habit. That's the hard bit, no matter what it is. So whether it's about reducing drinking, stopping drug use, or kind of becoming more physically active or losing weight. And it's about how do you help people with that process. Often, and certainly in the UK, a very kind of standard medical approach is the assumption that all you need to do is tell people that what they're doing is unhealthy and that they need to change. I think all that this does is it just creates in the person a sense that they're being told what to do. And also they can often feel guilty, or it can make them feel bad about themselves. And then what happens is it makes it less likely that they'll change. So I think there's something about when you're working with people and helping them to change, it's about taking an approach where you're going to work with the person, not confront them, not tell them that what they're doing is bad, because all that does is that just affects their self-esteem, and then it makes them less likely to change. So it's a double approach: work with them and also recognize that what they're trying to do is difficult, and that you kind of help and support their self-esteem so that they have a sense they can do this.
Yes. So I have a few questions. Remember, we were saying that I am a person that I need to be pushed, to do something, and it actually works good for me. And I told you that actually, if you make me feel like fearful, like your father had a heart problem, you're gonna have it. You have like 40%, 70%, I don't know what chances to have the same problem. This actually works well for me. So would you say that there is a research around that, actually, that there is a difference in, I don't know, genes probably, or whatever, for these people that makes them like dislike this approach?
Yeah, and so I think what you're describing is the fact that everyone's different and everyone approaches the changing in a different way. But I think the core kind of, as someone working with people trying to help them change, it's about understanding that person and what motivates them to change. So for some people, it will be exactly as you are. For other people, it'll be different. And I think what it's about spending some time working with the person, understanding them, and helping them build their confidence that they can make these changes. And so something about that is just kind of even asking people, like, for example, and it might not be around kind of becoming more active or losing weight, but just asking them in the past, what are some of the strategies that have helped you make changes in lifestyles? And then understand what works for them.
So solid.
Yeah, and I think while that's important, it helps you understand the person, but also, and this is kind of goes back to this idea of motivational interviewing, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to enhance the person's confidence that they can make these changes. And so by helping the person focus on times when they did make significant changes, that already starts to move them into a place where they feel more confident and better able to change. And also, what you're doing is you're working on strategies that works for them. And I think sometimes what happens as practitioners, we make assumptions and we just try a certain approach. Everyone's different, and I would imagine that people have had some success at some point in their lives, and they've used strategies that work for them. So it's just understanding what
Oh
it
my
is.
God.
Yeah, what
Oh my
works for
God.
them.
That's so balanced, what you just said there. Seriously, I'm having goosebumps because seriously, yeah, there wouldn't be any better answer for that. And so I would wrap up this in order to help my colleagues. I would say first listen and then give suggestions, right? Is that what you suggest?
Yeah, so I think it's about spending time talking to the person,
Mhm.
and don't make assumptions about what will work and won't work, but ask the person about any time in their life where they've made changes to, and it could be anything. You
Mhm.
know, what was it you did and how did it work? What worked for you?
So, is there a protocol in this motivational interview, or are there stages? When do they relapse? Because we know that this is a disease that it has a lot of relapses. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with the word like disease or not.
So I think referring to it as a disease, it's very much taking a medical approach to it, a medical
Mhm.
model. And I think, unfortunately, what comes with that then is a medical approach to treatment is often, and certainly in the UK, medical doctors can have a kind of a very sort of patriarchal view of people, which is I'm the expert and I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to follow what I tell you to do. What motivational interviewing says is it it almost gets away from the idea whether it's a disease or whatever. It says, I'm not interested in that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work with you and I'm going to help you change. But the motivation is going to come from you. And
Mhm.
how I'm going to help you do that is by thinking about things like in the past, when you tried to change, what's worked and what hasn't worked. And it's
Okay.
like, okay, so let's build on strategies that have worked for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry. Okay. So you have this one session with them. I mean, probably training coaches, they wouldn't get any further. Probably this is what you do, the psychologist. But I was having this, let's say, revelation of this motivational interview, or would say self-help motivational interview,
Sure.
when I was trying to find strategies to help myself quit smoking.
Yeah.
And then I tried to apply this model with my obese clients. It actually helped, some of them, and didn't help some of them. And I
Mhm.
want your opinion about that. I would go further than asking them what helped you at the past, and I would tell them probably what helped me at the past. And that was actually find my motivations and writing them down, finding my struggles and write them down. Actually, I was doing this before quitting smoking, and I was imagining what would happen, what would be my strategy when, I bump into my struggle.
Yeah.
So would you recommend those things, even if they say, if they don't say that it helped them, or if they don't refer to them as tools of them?
So what motivational interview, its starting place is, this is not about you. It's the same when I'm working with people. This is not about me telling them what might have worked for me. It's about me
Okay.
understanding them, where they are, what it is they want to change, why they want to change, what might have worked for them before, what are some of the barriers that they might find, and then trying to work with them.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would probably never talk about myself in terms of what I may or may not have done, because I'm really just really focused on the person, their
Okay.
experience, where they're at.
Okay. This helps a lot.
Yeah.
Seriously. This
So
humbled me.
no,
And
but look,
you wouldn't recommend like either a toolkit from like gathered from other people. You wouldn't recommend anything, even if they're struggling finding, because some people are, and I've also been in this situation. I'm struggling considering one situation as achievement, or as life changing or whatever. Some people, they say, I didn't achieve anything in my life. I don't have anything that helped me ever changing anything in my life. So you wouldn't recommend something then?
so so I think if that's happening, then what you've got to recognize is at that point in time, that person, their self-esteem is very low and they're seeing
Okay.
themselves only in negative terms. Now, if you then just try and give them strategies to use, do you think it's going to work? Because they're so negative about themselves, they're so self-critical. What do you think is going to
Right.
happen if you just straight away try to get them to change and give them all these strategies and techniques?
Yeah, you're right. Something to contemplate about.
So I think, again, and I've come across this as well, where people can say, I've never achieved anything in my life and I've never done anything.
Sure you did.
So that, I think, just shows that they're in a very self-critical mind. And what you need to do, spend time, is just kind of understand that and actually spend a bit of time really going through their life. And actually, I am willing to say this. I don't think anyone has never achieved anything in their life.
I'm sure about that, but a lot of people cannot find that at the beginning, probably, of a session. And like, notice that I'm not a psychologist or psychotherapist. So would I give them any of those stimuli, during doing yoga? Because this is what I do, or even, fitness. I consider this a really difficult thing, because I think that if people are pushed over their limit, sometimes they don't come at the class.
So I think you're making a really good point.
They don't show up.
Of course, because if someone's in that really negative mindset and self-critical mindset, if they're pushed, they can then interpret that as, I've failed again, I've messed up. And then obviously when people feel like that, they tend to avoid, they disengage. So what I think, and I think the earlier bit you said makes a lot of sense, what you can do as a fitness instructor, if someone's really got that really lack confidence or self-belief, through helping them experience and achieve. So it could be anything, couldn't it? In yoga, Pilates, but that starts then to give them a sense of, I can do this.
Right.
And that then starts to reverse that negativity, and they start to have a sense of, I can do this, I can change, and then you can start to work with. But you see how that's different from going in straight with, here's a lot of strategies and techniques, because what you're doing is
right.
You're starting to kind of, part of behavioral change in motivational interviewing is actually perhaps you need to spend a bit of time helping them improve their self-belief or their confidence. And once you start to do that, and you can do that through helping them, I guess a yoga session, helping them just even get through that first session and just reflect back what an achievement that is for them. And then what you can also do is say to them, if they're able to do that, what was it that you said or did that made you stick with this?
So when they come, not in between sessions.
That actually, so if someone's in a real negative mindset, the very fact that they've come and they've asked, I want to do something different, I would use that and say, that's amazing. So already what you're saying is you're motivated to change. That's really positive.
Okay, I've talked to a lot of colleagues of mine, and the problem that all of them they do have is, what do they do when the client doesn't show up, and it's intrusive to call them. Sometimes we find it intrusive to call them and tell them, come, motivation, like Will Smith, push yourself, or I don't know what. Or anyway, just call them. It might be intrusive. So do you recommend any other strategies, to bring them back when they don't show up?
So what I would do when I first meet them and I'm talking to them, I would ask them about, well, what are the barriers that have stopped you from changing before? What would that look like? And then get them to give an example of there's bound to be a time where they try to change, where they try to lose weight or become more active, and then get them to tell you what that experience was like. And then what you'll get is you'll get a sense of what it is that happens, then they then drop out. And so by even talking about that, what you're starting to do is you're starting to identify the barriers that they might experience or have experienced. And then you can kind of say to them, what shall we do if that happens in what we're going to do together? So if for some reason you feel like it's not working, and in the past what you've done is you've then thought, well, it must be my fault, so I'm just not going to go back because I don't want to be judged by my instructor. So what you say is, if that happens again, what do you want me to do? What can I do to help you come back?
Okay, that's really good. And I've heard that, in order to go deep into their actual reason that they do or they don't do something, you have to ask. Okay, some people say 7 times. I think there is some truth there. People don't answer this question really easily, because they feel probably that they reveal too much of themselves. So is there a technique there?
So I think it's about.
Do you agree probably that this is happening? Do you agree, first of all?
Sure, and I think people are generally, without them being aware of it, their brain kind of sets things up so that it protects them emotionally and psychologically.
Right.
And so again, it's likely that if someone's contemplating changing, it can feel a very exposing situation, because what that person's doing is they're coming along and they're saying to someone, I want to change. And that takes such a lot of courage, because the danger is that they might get criticized or made to feel inadequate. So I think already people are quite kind of wary.
From themselves, or
Yeah.
from themselves?
Well,
Wow.
from themselves, but also kind of thinking that the other person's got to criticize them. And that feeds into perhaps a pattern of self-criticism and also criticism from outside.
Okay.
So I think that is a good strategy. But again, it's all about using it wisely and understanding the person. And again, there's something about early on talking to them about this and saying, in the past, when this has happened, what did it feel like for you, and what worked to get you back? What could have been done differently, and what didn't work? So for some people, to push too deep too quickly would just kind of push them further away. For some people, it might help, but again, it's talking to them and understanding.
How would you know which people are going to be pushed away and which aren't? I mean, is there a sign?
I would just ask them and talk to them about their past experiences and what happened, and get a real understanding of that.
And you're just proactive to keep some distance.
Yeah, I would say, look, this is what's happened before when you've tried this. And I would be honest, I say it's likely it's going to happen when we're working together. In fact, I would say it's almost inevitable, but it's really important that we're able to talk about it, and then I can help you overcome that, and I can help you continue in your progress. So you basically say, it's happened before, it'll happen with us, but let's do something different.
Okay. So you would bring these questions during the sessions as well, as I assume, right? From what you said, you're not putting all of these questions at the beginning and then you don't talk. You're expecting from this person to come and do everything. So you just bring them again.
Yeah. Okay. So I think early on, there's something about identifying the barriers that stop people from changing and understanding what that is for that person, because it's different for everyone. And then once you have that understanding, then you can come back to it if and when you need to. Because I can guarantee, if they're the barriers that person's identified for them, that will be there all the time in the work that you're doing with them. So it's always just being aware that might be part of what's happening and helping them to always overcome those barriers.
Okay, let's go to the second sector. I need to educate people through the social media. Is it any way different the way that I speak to these people? You know, can I reveal more of the research, the risk factors, or, you know, still I have to stay empathetic, let's say, you know, and how is it different?
So I think the challenge is when you're doing something like that, the potential audience are going to be at different stages of change. So you'll get some people who, I've just kind of even caught myself thinking about that. If the person's motivated then they're looking and they found whatever it is, your podcast or your YouTube video, then I suppose you can assume that they're already thinking about changing, because they wouldn't be looking otherwise. Think that's fair?
Yeah. So I have a person in my mind that have been looking up fit girls doing exercises, and they would admire them and consume, you know, their content. And though it was stages away from having taken the decision to do something themselves, you know. So it's I don't know, with social media, it's virtual reality. It's a little bit different than it is in real life. So you can still consume, but you haven't been taking the decision.
So what I think you need to think about then is, who is it you're targeting? So is it someone who's in what they call the contemplation stage, where they're already thinking about changing, and then they might be making those early steps? Then what you would need to do then is tailor. Well, actually, what you would decide is, well, that's who I'm going to target. So you can't be all things to all people. You have to target specifically. So if it's people who are in that stage where they're already sort of starting to think, then you can target your message to help them take that next step.
So how do you speak to these people? And is contemplation the first step?
No. So the first step is pre-contemplation, which is basically, I don't have a problem, and therefore there's nothing for me to think about. So that's literally someone who's just, for example, is overweight, and they're not even thinking that I have a problem and I need to change.
I remember from the masters, actually, that it is a circle, right? So from relapse, you go again to pre-contemplation, you're closing again. Is that right?
So it's not a linear circle. So people jump around the stages a lot.
Oh, okay.
So it might be that someone who's changing and then kind of relapses, they may go back to sort of contemplation.
Can they go back to pre-contemplation? Can somebody?
Yeah, of course. They can
How?
just shut. They
How?
just shut the emotion.
Shut.
They just shut down and they just go back to. I guess you'd call it being in denial. So there's nothing wrong with me. There's no problem. There's nothing I need to change.
Okay, so do we all have this mechanism? Because I don't want to be like thinking, oh, these people are different, I think,
No,
if I'm being honest, I think this is a protective mechanism that we all have at some point in our lives,
of
right?
course. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
part of being a human being, and it's there for a reason. So, again, I think sometimes the problem is when someone says, "Oh, you're in denial," it can be used in a very kind of judgmental way, and it's not that at all. Because actually, sometimes it's quite helpful to be in that pre-contemplative state where
And healthy, right?
it is
Okay,
absolutely.
because it protects you, one part of you. Okay.
It's part of a normal range of emotional and psychological states and defenses that it's fine. I think the problem is if someone gets stuck in that, and that's what they tend to get stuck in it.
How does this happen?
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's about kind of saying that people consciously make these choices or decisions, because I think the brain is amazing, and a lot of what the brain does is we're not actually consciously aware of it. So the brain's always trying to protect us, and sometimes it might get stuck in that protection mode, and the person isn't even aware that that's what's happened.
Okay, so I've been experiencing that even though they tell themselves, that they don't have a problem, they tell me that they want to change. Can, as a coach, exploit, let's say, this moment and do something good for them?
Yeah.
How would you do that? Because they're vulnerable when they do have these moments. I can tell that.
Yeah. So what you're basically describing again is a normal human process about ambivalence. So
all right.
So when there's something we want to think about that we might want to change, we're normally ambivalent. So there's a part of us really wants to change, and there's a part of us doesn't.
Right.
And that's what I think you're describing. And that's the challenge when you're getting people to change, is what in that constant state of I want to and I don't want to. And I think sometimes, again, going back to motivational interviewing, what that does is that recognize as an approach that recognizes that state. And again, it would get you actually saying to the person, so I think that it would even say something like, so it sounds like there's part of you wants to change and there's part of you is not sure about changing. And so there's something about the behavior that they're engaged in does have is serving a function for them, but they also may want to try and change that. So it's about helping them understand what is it that you're gaining from this behavior. And if you try to change, what is it that you would gain from that? And helping them see there's this kind of constant struggle.
Okay, do I take the opportunity by myself, or still they have to ask me, help me?
No, and I think probably that's a really nice example. And what you could do is just simply reflect back and say, what it seems like is for a lot of the time, you almost say there's no problem. But now what you're telling me is that actually you would like to change. Right. And I would even just reflect them back to that and say, like, help me understand that, what's going on.
Okay.
And hopefully what you'd get, they would then be able to reflect on that, and they would then say, yeah, I guess, obviously I don't think they'd use the word ambivalent, but they'd say, I do want to change, but I'm also scared of changing because I've been doing this for whatever it is. So there's that sense of, okay, that's where they're at. And then the motivation comes from helping them work with that. It almost, in a way, it kind of helps them sort of like realize there's some flexibility there that they can change, because part of them is saying, I do want to change and I'm asking for that help. So that's the flexibility. So what they've done is they've crossed from pre-contemplation into contemplation. And now what they're saying is, I'm not sure what to do with this. I need some help to take it further.
Okay, so I guess there is different toolkit for every stage. Am I correct?
I think that's the way the theory kind of talks about, but I think there has been criticism of the theory that sometimes it can be too rigid, and also that actually people don't always follow the same pattern. But I think there is something helpful thinking about that. People aren't always in the same mindset. People move around a lot. And so that I think is helpful. And it's just recognizing that when someone's there, and when someone's in a certain place, that to talk to them in a certain way may or may not be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
They may not be ready for lots of very strategic strategies to get them to change. They're still, because they're still in that contemplative stage, and that sense of, I want to change, is still quite fragile. So you almost have to support their self-esteem to help them have the confidence to make that step. Because again, it's what you're asking people to do is a huge thing. And I think you used the word vulnerability, and that's what happens when people are talking to whoever it is and saying, I want to change something. It's making themselves very vulnerable.
Okay. Yeah. What I had in my mind when I asked if there is like a different toolkit at every stage, I was thinking about self-regulation and self-help, because what I found really helpful in my life through yoga, and actually, I'm not referring to asana, I'm referring to guided meditation, or, all sorts of meditation, mindfulness probably, is that you divide yourself from yourself, I would say. You change the interpretation of what is self for you. And sometimes we consider our body to be ourself, and then the outer image reflects into us. You understand what I mean? So we have a technique in meditation that we become the observer of what is. And when you decide to be the observer, when you decide though to give some qualities, so you decide that this observer is kind and empathetic. Okay, I mean, whatever that means, it always means kind and empathetic.
Of course.
It's not that broad. You cannot be like empathetic and at the same time like pose some criticism to yourself. That's it, I'm kind and empathetic towards myself. So when you do that and you become the observer, it actually regulates the nervous system, and from probably sympathetic goes to parasympathetic, or balance it. You might need to go the other way around. So if you like educate those people to do this meditation technique, how do you turn it into contemplation? Would you propose any technique? So my actual question is, what techniques do you suggest for self-regulation?
Right.
If they've built the awareness?
So that's a really good question. So there are countless techniques. So what I say to people is, I'll often say, especially if it's self-help, I can point them in a direction of lots of different resources, and I'll say to them, why don't you go and have a look at these? Look at them, see what you think, see if they'll work for you, and give it a try.
Right.
It may work, it may not, but that's okay, because we're all different. So for some people, meditation works brilliantly. For other people, it's not going to work.
No, except for meditation, what other techniques would you share with us? Like, which one would you refer to for self-regulation?
So self-regulation, I suppose things like mindfulness, but I guess meditation is part of mindfulness.
Yeah, I'm using the word meditation as an umbrella, and mindfulness is under the umbrella. And I've been reading and research about meditation, and it really opened my eyes, because I was pushing myself into meditation at times that I didn't need to go inside, and this not only didn't work for me, but it actually worked in the opposite direction, depressed. So I know that meditation is not for everybody, but then there are like other things that we call meditation, like walking meditation, or sports meditation, or movement meditation, whatever. But what I was referring to is the meditative state of mind. This, like the aha moment, that it actually makes you separate or divide the brain into two. And then, the one is illuminated, let's say, and the other one is what it is. Okay, what do you think, or was thinking past moment that it is. So I was asking if they have this awareness, which they might gain it from meditation, mindfulness, or whatever, then what they do with this awareness of, oh, I'm back to pre-contemplation. Oh, I'm back to contemplation. What do they do then? Do they have a toolkit at every stage, or their toolkit, not from research?
Yeah, so I think this is where I don't think the model is helpful, because I think sometimes we get caught up in the theoretical terms and phrases. So when I work with people, it's very rare that I'll talk in those terms about, oh, you're this, you're that. I would tend just to be, if that's what I'm trying to help the person do, then say, here's a range of techniques or strategies that work for different people. Have a look at them. Or again, I would go back to what's worked for you in the past. And then I would say, well, why aren't you doing that now? What's stopping you from doing that now? And then identify the barrier that's stopping them from doing what works for them, because this is what kind of happens. People get into that habit.
So what would that be? I know you said a range of, but would you share some of those?
So this goes back to my style as a psychologist. I'm not prescriptive. So I don't say
Mm,
do A, B, C, or D, because I just say to people, well, actually, what I will say to people is, what is it you've done in the past? A, that either
okay.
that you've enjoyed doing or that you find helpful, and then work with that rather than saying, here's a list of things. Because
Hmm.
again, often what then happens is the person says, but like, I don't want to do yoga.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but again, I'm pretty sure I've never worked with someone who hasn't got some strategy or technique that works for them.
Hmm.
I think the thing is that at the moment, they're not doing that. And it's about understanding, why is it you've stopped doing the things that helped you get into that kind of positive mindset or good place. There was a danger, and this happened in clinical psychology in the UK. It kind of goes through phases where it's like, give everyone mindfulness, tell everyone to go to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
gym.
yeah, yeah.
And it's like, it just doesn't work.
I've read a lot of articles about mindfulness and how it actually pushes you through, let's say the bad stages of whatever disease you
Yeah.
are, or, mostly depression and sadness and all of these things. So I totally agree with that. So, yeah, basically, we can resume this interviewing to ask them what works for them, and that's it. Listen to them all of the time. So, I don't know if this is a bad thing or a good thing, but every time that I find myself combating this whatever difficult situation I'm facing, I gain more power, and then I have more of this. Remember this time that you achieved something.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is when I have relapses, because I also was having dietary disorders,
Sure.
right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
binge eating
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
dieting, very strictly. Okay,
Yeah.
when I was an athlete.
Of course.
So, and then I remember that I wasn't sober, at the moment when I was having like the binge eating episode,
Yeah.
right? And then when I was sober, what was when I could do the progress
Yeah.
actually. Did you ever have clients that come to you while not being sober, while
Yeah.
being in the situation?
Of course. And again, I've worked with people with eating disorders, so binge eating, anorexia. And what it's about helping the person understand is, what's the purpose or what function is the, whether you're binging or restricting, why are you doing that now? Understand what's happening in their life that they're trying to manage through their eating. And
Hmm.
once you can help the person understand that, then you can start to help them think about, well, that's what needs addressing. So I was trying to think, particularly when working with athletes, if they're suffering from a lack of confidence, what they tend to do is they'll tend to either overtrain or restrict even more what they eat, because they think that's what I need to do to get back to performing. And all that happens is they get stuck in a cycle of not performing well, trying to over control what they're doing, and then not performing well. So it's about even helping them understand that that's what's happening, and that their eating isn't just random. It's like they're trying to solve a problem.
Hmm.
And I think once you help them understand that the reason behind why they're doing that, then you can help them come up with different alternatives to cope with whatever it is they're coping with.
Hmm.
That doesn't involve
Okay.
the eating. And I guess what that basically saying is, particularly in eating, it's being driven by an emotional issue or problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell that.
And that's what you help the person understand. And once they have that insight, and you can help them develop different ways of coping with whatever it is they're trying to cope with, that doesn't involve controlling their eating or binging,
Hmm.
then that helps them kind of move away from that way of being.
On the other hand, would you agree that there is also biology playing a role? Do you know the foods that raise your glucose in the blood, and then it
Sure.
pushes you back into this circle. So I know that we both are not dietitians, and unfortunately in West science, like we have those things divided and we
Of
cannot
course.
talk about diet. But would you spread any light into this sector that maybe the quality of the food is bringing you back into this relapsing?
Yeah, of course. And particularly when working with athletes, I think there's something about helping them almost re-educate them about what it is they're doing, and actually that, yeah. So whether it's because they're restricting what they're eating, helping them
Hmm.
understand that is that actually helping you optimize your performance? So I guess going into a very physiological, at a very simple level, and saying to them, what you're eating or not eating, it's not going to make you perform to your best, because you're essentially, you're not getting enough fuel, or you're getting the wrong kind of fuel, or you're eating at the wrong time. So I would tend to do that more with athletes. But then also what I would then say is, actually then now you need to go and speak to an expert,
Yes.
sports nutritionist, because they'll help you with this. So I can help you with the psychology, they can help you with coming up with a really good plan, and then together that'll get things back on track. But I think there's always scope to be able to do that.
So as I can understand, you wouldn't give a big chunk of your session into this thing, but you would put it as, this might be happening, right?
Yeah,
I mean, perhaps, maybe, I remember your words, maybe this is happening also, and this is not probably your fault, just the choices that you do. Is that right? This is how you're going to put it.
Yeah, so that's very much a motivational interviewing approach. What you say is, I wonder if this is what's happening. Whereas I think sometimes in medicine, because of that power difference, a doctor will say, this is what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because sometimes a good example is, if you have a broken leg, you have a broken leg.
Yes.
Because the x-ray is showing it, and then there's very clear things. But when we're kind of talking about this kind of change in psychology, it's always about thinking about helping the person. Just that question, I wonder if this is what's happening for you.
Yes. And that leads me to this other thing that I was having in mind. I know that the discussion around motivation changed a little bit. We thought that you first have to give people motivation or help them find their motivation, whatever it is. But now we know that you should just ask them to do something, and then they will find the motivation, right? So, and we know that the hormones change through exercise anyway. So, yeah, so I was wondering, how you do this.
So I think a good example, when I work with someone who's depressed.
Yes.
So in order to get them, so there's a lot of evidence that if you can get people being active again and doing the, because when people become depressed, they stop doing the things they enjoy doing.
Absolutely.
So to get them back doing that is a really effective treatment. But what you have to work on is, part of being depressed is having that lack of energy, lack of motivation, those very self-critical thoughts. So everything, lots of barriers as to why I should do something. So you have to kind of work with that bit first, as well as start getting them to do things to change. Like, so whatever that is, going for a walk or whatever, but also understanding that for them, that step outside their front door, they're going to have a lot of internal thoughts about, it's pointless doing this. I'm not, what's the point? I mean, and that's the bit where you work on as well. So you work with them together, and actually then they fit really well. So you help them understand some of those negative critical thoughts, help them recognize them, and then sort of change them, with the goal of getting them to be more active. And then once you get that working together, that's where you get some really, can be quite dramatic changes.
If you allow me.
Of course.
It's from my experience. I was never having obesity problems, but I was having binge eating a lot and depression. So I would say that the more circles I've been through, the less time it needs me to step out of my door. Even when I am at the depression state, I have a reminder. I don't know how I pose this into my head, that says, just do it, not to promote Nike, but this was brilliant, actually. Just do it, and then it will come, and it's like an illumination, to be honest. It's like I get into the mindfulness state of mind, actually, a lot easier when I have done it again and again and again.
That's because what you're able to do is you're able to remind yourself what works for you.
Yes. I was having this conversation with my PhD professor, actually. He's in philosophy and education. And I was telling him that most of the problems was actually us forgetting our aha moment. Would you agree that what we say in yoga is that the more conscious you become, the more illuminated that you become? And if we put this in real life, I think this is it, to like gain a mechanism somehow, to have those reminders ready in your head,
Of course, I think that's a great way to look at it, and I think that's essentially what we do. But I think there's also a recognition that sometimes people face things in their life that make that impossible to do. So
I forget that there are situations that it's okay to have these moments, right?
No, of course, and that's part of kind of helping people understand why, because part of being human and living a life is to kind of almost acknowledge and accept there's ups and downs, and it's always going to be like that, and that's part of being human. And there'll be times when, if you like, we relapse, and we might kind of, if we're faced with, a kind of really good example is if we're faced with a relationship breakdown, that might push us back into some of the ways of coping that we did in the past. But that's okay, because you're just reacting to that situation. And it's just about kind of realizing that and then working through that and dealing with it directly. And then that helps you move through it. But again, it's always just accepting that that's what's happened and acknowledging.
You're so right. I need to call you more often, as I said. And I have a last question, which is about AA, but for binge eating, or they actually call it anonymous excessive eating. Do you have this? This is in Greek. So it's the 12 steps for people that eat excessively. Do you have something like that in the UK?
I'm sure there is.
Mm-hmm. Have you collaborate with these people, or maybe do you know anything about that?
So I don't know anything about that, but I think that's probably because I don't specialize in eating disorders. I have worked with people who have experienced eating disorders. And so I think in the UK, so we obviously have the National Health Service. So that's where people go to get treatment. But then things like AA, we would call those the third sector or the voluntary sector. And that's where people can they don't have to go through their doctor to get treatment. They can just, so that, what you said there, I'm sure that there's an organization and a website that people can contact directly, and then they can access all that support and then kind of do that themselves.
Yeah.
I haven't come across that before, but I'm sure people use it.
Yeah. I think what changes is the group thing, the supportive thing. And they also have this supreme power. They say we allow ourselves, to be guided from this supreme power, which it might be God, it might be the ownness that they feel being part of a group.
Yeah. So I think you're right. And I think so in the UK, we have a lot of kind of organizations like that, which kind of specialize in certain areas. And that's one of their strengths, is that it tends not to be run by healthcare professionals. It's run by people who've gone through what the other people are going through. And I think that's where the strength comes from, because you're talking to people who know what you're going through and they can help you. And they do it in a empathic, non-judgmental way. And again, if people relapse, you're not judged. You're just kind of treated that well, okay, it happened, but let's get things back going again. So I think you're right. That's exactly how it helps.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that if you somehow connect those people together in an exercise class, it might work better. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's exactly what you need. So when people are trying to become more active, what actually doesn't help is some Olympic athlete telling them to become more active. And actually we had a really good campaign in the UK. I think it was called This Girl Can. And what it was ordinary women and girls exercising. So they weren't athletes, they weren't professional, they were just and a range of body shapes and sizes. And that's what it was trying to show. It was just for ordinary. And that's what inspires people more, actually, because they can connect with that, because they can see that person's like me and they're exercising and they're having a great time. Perhaps I can give it a go.
Okay. About social media and body shaming, I would say cultural thing, that it's been around for a while. And some people have been accusing for even deaths that have been happening. Are you aware of that?
Yeah. And I think what we're not aware of on social media is how much all images are altered to kind of make them this kind of perfect image. And so this campaign that I think it was Sport England came up with, This Girl Can, it was ordinary women and girls exercising, and nothing about them was changed or re-edited. Because on social media, there's filters, isn't there? So you can make yourself look younger or whatever. And I think there is something around that.
I'm actually referring to the opposite thing. Women that are modeling obesity, and they are grade 4, grade 3, grade 4 obese. And they're actually creating a group of people that they hate being told what to do, or all of this. It became a thing,
So
now. And
you're right. And I think
I'm
that's what
talking
happens.
about death from being
Yeah.
obese.
So that is a problem. And it happens a lot with self-harm as well. So there can be like WhatsApp self-harm groups where they actively encourage and they kind of fuel each other to self-harm and even to kill themselves sometimes. So going back to that example about groups can be incredibly powerful in terms of a force for good.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the opposite's true, where they can also cause harm as well.
Yeah. And what would you recommend the society do from your perspective to help them to make society inclusive people? Because I think the other side of the coin, when they've been bullied all of these times and they became the bullies, right?
Yeah.
So what recommendation would you give to society if you've been asked to do?
So I think what you're describing again is, unfortunately, is part of human nature. So I think all of us, we have the capacity to be empathic, understanding, but also we also have the capacity to be a bully, to be violent, to be aggressive. And I think at an individual level, we just have to acknowledge that and just kind of manage it ourselves to ensure that that we understand how we are.
Well, okay. And with this, I'm saturated. Okay, that was really a pleasure. I hope that it really include all of the concerns that an exercise coach would have. And I think you actually covered a lot of questions that a psychologist that starts now would have, or a dietitian. And I hope that we also help people that are in the contemplation or whatever stage they are, and they come back, because this is going to be online and they can come back wherever they are ready to take and consume, but actually act on those directions that you gave or suggestions.
Yeah.
And do you want to add something for the end?
I've really enjoyed the chat. I think it's the fact that it's gone by quite quickly, I think shows that it's been good.
Thank you. It's well.
No, I think that's covered everything. And I think there's just something about, as practitioners, about just understanding the person we're working with. And as an individual, it's about having that courage to take that step, to ask for help. And that's a big step, but,
okay.
Take it.
Just take it. We have to have a motto. All right. Thank you, guys.
It's not Nike, do it. Or was that Nike? It's yours can be take that step, whatever that is. That's good. I like that. It's a good place to end.
Yes. Perfect. And where can people find you in the UK? Where exactly do you serve people online also?
Yeah, so I'm very old-fashioned. I don't have any online. I don't do social media. So
you just did it.
I know. I don't have Instagram, all that kind of stuff. So basically, I work as a clinical psychologist at the moment for Northumbria Police. So I help them with their police officers who are struggling with mental health problems. So that's what I do at the moment. But as I say, I'm very old-fashioned.
Can somebody else or it's just policemen that they can come to you?
No, so I don't work privately, so I don't have a private practice. So that's my job.
Too pity. Seriously.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I hope that we speak again, and maybe we do mental illness and exercise if you would fancy that.
I'm a big fan of physical activity as a way to kind of manage how we feel in our mental health. Definitely. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Perfect. So say hello to Sally.
I will.
And great. And have a great day. What is the time there?
So I think we're 2 hours behind.
Okay. All right.
Are you on Corfu at the moment?
Yes, I am. I'm still here. Yeah. And I'm going to exploit the rest of the afternoon. What are you going to do for your Sunday?
So I'm making dinner tonight. So I'm making curry, some vegan curry.
Perfect.
Tonight, me and Sally are feeding our souls.
Oh my God.
I tell you what, that's what we did a lot when we were over in Corfu. It's one of my favorite things about Greece. The food you have is so simple, but it's so amazing. The ingredients are just so fresh and very nice.
They taste differently, right?
Definitely.
Yes, because people have, especially in the islands, and I can tell that because I've lived in Kos, actually in Kardamena, which is a small village in Kos, for 2 summers and 1 winter, and I was having my own yoga and Pilates studio. And the tastes that I had this winter was something, seriously, I didn't know that there are these tastes. And it's because during winter, people are actually doing it with love. and it's nurture, like when they nurture the ground, it nurtures them back, their soul, actually, because during summer they're working so much, and they actually exhaust themselves. And then during winter, this is this cycle that is actually giving the earth this capacity to grow something good.
So
And
I think
even the idea.
so I think
I'm
for
excited.
Sally now's on her allotment, and I think that's what she does. It allows her to
Yes.
reconnect with nature and growing. There's something very fundamental about that as human beings, I think.
Okay, I wish I would be asked to come in one of your dinners. Okay, and if not, I hope that I meet you again.
What you'll have to do, you'll have to set up a yoga retreat, and Sally and I'll come over and do it.
Absolutely. Expect me to do it next year for sure.
Very good.
Okay.
But yeah, look, like I'm happy for you to get back in touch, and even just like how, like, what are people's reactions or responses to what we've done? It'd be really interesting to know.
Absolutely. Yeah. You would know for sure because it's going to be on YouTube.
Okay.
So prepare yourself to have a lot of comments, and I'm sure they're going to be good ones.
I'm sure there'll be some negative ones as well, but that's okay. That's part
because
of
this
life.
is nature. Exactly.
Human
This is
nature.
human nature.
Of course.
Now
Yeah,
I know. Now I know. I've learned my lesson. I'm gonna put the reminder on. This is human nature. I'm bad at moments, so why would other people won't be?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Brilliant stuff. Glad to be able to help you.
Namaste.
Namaste. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.